Hi, welcome. I'm Jennifer Roberts. As you know, I'm joined with Doc Anand, who I co-host with on Spice FM in the UK every Tuesday. But this is the very first time that I'm having a guest on my channel. That guest is David Mathisen. I am having to do a little bit of a cut and edit because this being the first time I've used Zoom to have a guest on here, it took me a little bit of time to realize that we needed to mute one another while we spoke so that there wasn't the feedback. So the introduction that I tried to give David was not able to be listened to. I wouldn't do that to you all. So I saw David Mathisen on Sam Tripoli's Tinfoil Hat podcast, which is one of my favorites. Love Sam, I love the team, I love the work that he does. But when he had David on, I was blown away by David's energy imprint. You all know I work with energy. This guy is just whole. He's passionate about his message, but he delivers it in such a balanced way that is so far removed from ego. It's just a beautiful thing to see. So I put the manifestation out there that David might have a discussion with me, let alone take my invitation to be a guest, my very first guest. So I'm very pleased that my manifestation skills are up to scratch because David obviously accepted. He goes far and beyond, having been a part of organized religion himself, and finding more depth in the stories when he removed himself a little bit away from that and was able to see that where, and I speak on David's behalf here, my perception of what his message does for me, in that he was able to see that where we are divided in these organized religions, the stories all marry up with one another. And he goes even further to be a dot connector to show us that we can have unity in spiritual knowledge, because the myths within these stories are actually depicted in the very stars above our heads. And he goes far and beyond to show us visually within the constellations themselves being held within ancient artifacts and ancient depictions. And so it really is for me, and hopefully for the listeners of this podcast, to see that this is a key to unity, to show that not one lid or label of anything that is organized can go above and beyond the stars just now as we know it, that we can have unity within all of these different religious setups in this deep spiritual knowledge and the true as above, so below. And so please support David in what he does. Please do copy me and purchase his latest book, Myth and Trauma, if you go onto his website, starmythworld.com, which is the most easy to use, which I appreciate a lot. Starmythworld.com. It also has the most beautiful graphics and design. So you see all of his books there, all of his works there, and he uploads the different podcasts that he's been on up on there too. So please enjoy. I'm going to let it go over to David now. And we hope to have him back again soon because he is a wealth of knowledge and he has so much more to say. So much love, be balanced, be whole, enjoy. Mwah.
That you saw me on Sam Tripoli's show. I do have readers in the UK there buying my books. I can see, month to month the sales. So there's some awareness of what I do over there and across the ocean. But thank you very much for having me on. I'm very excited to talk with you. And my understanding is that everybody brings out, everybody brings their own perspectives. So it's always wonderful to see what comes out of meeting with different people about these subjects that I think are important to everybody. And what's really interesting to me is that, Doc, you grew up partly in India, right? Until you came to the UK. You were already an adult. I heard you say on one of your shows that your brother talked about, oh, we need to go to we need to go to England or something. And it sounded like you were already had children and were
Wow,
going
you are
through.
an investigative journalist. You know so much about.
No, I only looked a little. I only looked at a few of your things.
The Tory party is like your Republican party, okay? And the Labour Party is like your Democrats. Anyway, my cousin came and said, come on, let's go to England. They're going to start exams. The racist party is coming. I said, so? He said, this is the last, and the exams are coming. So there was everything pitted against me. Racism, Tory party, and exams, they was just started. So I said, my wife is pregnant. He said, so what? Your parents will look after. I said, I don't have a ticket. I'll give you a ticket. So there was no way I could refuse it. And here I am, and I'm standing as a Tory party councillor, the party I'm supposed to be scared of. So, you know, these are promote myths. And so I've said enough, I'll let you say.
No, well, what's interesting to me is a lot of the work that I've done in research, you know, there's a very rich body, obviously, of ancient literature talking about from India, you know, the Vedas and the Puranas. And of course, we have a lot of records of what the Greeks, Greek mythology. So this system is worldwide. It is in Africa, it is in Australia, it is in the Americas. The Maya records, sadly, tragically, many of which were burned, but we do have some surviving codexes. I do have a picture of one from one of those in one of my one of the visuals that I put together. But places where we have a lot of scripture to examine, the Greeks and the Indian Sanskrit texts provide a lot of material to work with. So it's very exciting, you know, to talk to someone who probably knows much more deeply than I do, and certainly forgive my California accent on any of the pronunciations. I don't speak Sanskrit, but but the you know, all these myths, I am convinced they are teaching profound truths. Same with the stories in the Bible, but when they're taken literally, it's like the metaphor I use is when, you know, if someone invites me over to dinner, let's say, and I bring my friend who comes from another country, and he doesn't speak English, and my other friend, we both speak English, and he makes this beautiful dinner, and then he says, well, ask your friend, how do you like the dinner? Let's say maybe my friend speaks only Cantonese or only Mandarin, and I happen to speak that, and I say, hey, how'd you like the dinner? And he says, oh, I'm so happy to be here. Tell your friend that was a very nice dinner. I loved it. And I turned to my friend and said, he said it was awful. The spices were just, you know, really bad. And, you know, I'm in the position to interpret and misinterpret. And my friend is basically at my mercy, and he can't hear the language that my guest is actually speaking. So I think that's what's happened with some of the ancient texts. Yeah, they've been, it's as if they're speaking a different language. And if you want to hear what they really have to say, you want to hear them in the language that they're speaking. And the language that they're speaking is actually a metaphorical language. And it's based on this worldwide system, and it can be shown to be metaphorical because it connects up with the stars. That's the, and that's like the proof, or so for people who don't want to see that evidence, there might be some people who are really, really deeply invested in it being literal. And so I say, you know, those people should probably turn off the video, because if I show you some of this evidence, it really can cause a, you know,
cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance. And I used to take the Bible literally. I thought the Bible was supposed to be taken literally, and I worked very hard at taking it literally for 20 years of my adult life. And actually, I didn't grow up taking it literally. So this was something I latched onto as an adult when I was about 20, 21, because of things that I was going through. I was looking for answers. I was in the army.
Often said, it's easy to be a Christian. It's very hard to be a follower of Jesus. It's easy to be a Muslim. It's very hard to follow the prophet. It's very easy. Just have a name and you're done. Not at all. You have to actually understand the precepts and the principles and the forgiveness. I find Christianity impossible. I can't truly forgive. It's the easiest religion in the world, isn't it? So-called very tolerant and everything. And yet truly forgiving from your heart. And I try very hard. The others are easy, you know. The others are easy. But Christianity, allegedly, is a very simple religion. It's not, you know, truly letting go of your ego. Because I think hurt comes only to the ego, isn't it? I don't get hurt. My ego, my perception of me gets hurt. My mask gets hurt. Once you understand
right. Yeah,
that,
it's very egoic, yeah.
once you understand that, life's so easy.
Well, and I think that the myths can be shown to be talking about that exact dynamic that you just expressed, Doc, of the egoic person that we create. And it's there, it develops as a defense mechanism due to the things that we go through. It's trying to cope with this world that we're in. And so we have to have compassion on it. And I think the myths show that, this doubting self that we create. And I think the myths show that this doubting self is what trips us up and keeps us from our true self. But like you said, Doc, you said something very profound about, that's one of the things that drove me towards Christianity, was I wanted to change and I found I could not, or I wanted to stop. I would say, why did I say that to her? You know, what part of me was just talking right there? I can't seem to not do that. And actually there, you know, I ended up basically embracing probably the most, one of the most fanatical, you could say, the Calvinistic, which you're pretty close to Scotland. So Scotland was deeply Calvinist for centuries. And it basically says, well, that's what you should expect. You are radically, at your very root, sinful. And so therefore you need, you cannot actually embrace Christianity. Nobody can. So that's where predestination actually has to come into that. So I could go in the whole, I could give you a whole lecture on why predestination would be required if you're radically sinful. Now, I think that's it's like this logical construct that's been built upon a mistaken beginning, a mistaken understanding of what these ancient myths around the world, including the stories of the Bible, are all, I would argue, saying the same thing, using different pictures. But when you try and take it literally, and I think they're all actually trying to heal that trauma that we just described of, hey, I've got something inside of me that seems to be doing things that I don't like and keeping me from who I really am. How do I fix that? And so people who are looking for that, like I was, can embrace, you know, there is beauty and truth in these ancient myths, including in the stories in the Bible. But actually, when we take them literally, we can find some, maybe we can find some comfort. But ultimately, if you're hearing a wrong interpretation, which I think is what is going on, if you're, it doesn't fully satisfy. And the problem is that it actually causes trauma. Some of these teachings, I believe, cause trauma, like the doctrine of original sin, or the idea that women are subordinate to men. These sorts of things have been falsely supported by people, find false justification in certain scriptures to say, oh, you know, the woman must be silent, the man, you know, those sorts of things have been, I think, so it's been twisted. But I think people are, I think we can give some space for compassion and understanding of people who are they're trying to sort out their world and are saying, oh, here's some rules that I can follow to give some order and some meaning. And I think actually those ancient stories are profound and they speak to our hearts. But the problem is, if you've got leaders who are deliberately twisting them, which I think has also happened. In fact, the evidence is overwhelming that that's also happened, in order to exploit people, in order to oppress people, in order to justify things that, you know, that went on for centuries and are still going on. That's a big problem. So I don't know if I rambled around a little there.
No. It's good. I mean, I come from India, of course, and I went to a Catholic school, St. Joseph's, St. Xavier's, and St. Stephen's College is more English than Jennifer Roberts could ever imagine to be. You know, they talk so posh, you know, they talk like that and so on. And you develop a kind of a dislike for your own faith that you came from or your own country. But some of us rebels break through. And actually, the advantage of coming to England is I can see it from a distance. I can see faults there. I can see the goodness in the Catholic priests. Some of them are misguided. I mean, okay, they were very trapped in their little bubble. But I couldn't really challenge them. One day, the Father Murphy from Chicago was saying, oh, how can Durga, the goddess, be made of mud and clay, and how can she be thrown into the Ganges? And I'm 12 years old, and I said, Father, could God be made of plastic and wood? He says, no, that's idolatry. I said, can I take the cross down from behind your head and break it with my foot? So at the age of 12, I had to rebel. But now I've reached a point when I'm saying, forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do. Kind of a compassionate way of letting go instead of saying, Father Murphy was terrible. He wasn't, from his limited knowledge. And he gave up a lot, you know. I used to ask the priest, it's easy for you. You get beef to eat, you get little wine to drink, you got air conditioner. And one day he sat down with me and said, son, you don't know. I used to own a leather factory in Chicago. And I gave up all that to come and enjoy the heat and mosquitoes of Patna. So, you know, there was great honesty. He was like a guru, no longer a Catholic priest, but my very good friend. So sometimes you reach that point, you know, and you can reach out.
Right. And it's interesting that you bring up Durga because there are so many aspects of Durga and the statues that they make on Durga Puja, if I'm saying it right, that relate to the stars. She has a serpent and she has, there's a lion nearby, and she cast down Mahish Asur, right? Who has a bull's head, and there's a peacock there, usually a peacock. So I can show you some of what I think that relates to in the heavens. But that's not to say that Durga isn't real, or that these are not talking about real things. I think this is actually very real. And I think, you know, the gods work their way out through men and women. I think you can see that. I can show you that that is in the myths themselves, in the myths of ancient Egypt, in the myths of when you say to somebody the Anjali Mudra is an expression of recognizing the divinity in yourself and in others, but also you know, when Homer begins the Odyssey or the Iliad, the first lines, and I don't know if Homer is a real person, let's just say those ancient texts, the very first lines are an invocation of the goddess, an invocation of the muse, and they say, sing in me, muse. That's the first line of both of those. Sing through me. Well, how is that happening? And it's because I think the gods are real. And a psychologist might say, okay, well, like Freud expressed a lot of his teaching through reaching back to Greek mythology and saying, well, this is an Oedipal complex, or this is, you know, this is Antigone or something. So why is that? A psychologist might say, well, that's very well then. So all the gods are in our heads and are describing what's going on psychologically inside of us. And I would say that is partly true, but there is something beyond.
Above and so below really works for me, and the vibration of, especially working with energy, of the vibration of said god or goddess, that I can hum them through me and exude their energy towards whatever is going to be the best energy to implement in whatever experience I'm facing, or whatever experience I'm having guiding somebody spiritually. And I think, to be honest, for me, energy being a source in itself, that whatever we put a lot of energy and intent into, it's impossible for it not to become somewhat real, in that you manifest that existence of it. So when we have so many people having snippets of this worldwide knowledge that you speak of, and that I really resonate with, in that we've got all of these people, whatever names they're giving them, if it's done right, then it's that vibration of that said energy that you can channel, if you like, for want of a better word, through you, and use in the experiences that you're experiencing. What I struggled with when I grew up in churches was that I went through the whole Toronto experience coming to Newcastle. My mum and dad were really deeply in the church. I could speak in tongues. I could do, I saw people slain in spirit and things. What I didn't see was the fact that I saw poor people in the church that I cared for, and they would be all fired up and experienced, but because it had been externalized into just this character with this name, and they hadn't been taught that they can use that within them to implement in their lives in present day. Because this knowledge, when you get past the middleman layers that you were talking about before, being the middleman at the dinner party,
Right.
It's a level playing field of knowledge that surpasses time, knowledge that doesn't matter what century it lands in. This level down here and this level reflecting the level right above, for me, surpasses all time. It really is the spiral of time. It keeps being useful if you can. And what I didn't see in a lot of the churches that I experienced growing up until 13 years old, I refused to go, was the fact that people could implement that in their lives outside of the church walls. They left the church walls and their life was just as harsh, or just as a lot of these churches were in poor areas. And then they still gave their tithe that I knew as a child they couldn't afford. But the tithe was given in front of everybody else rather than it being private. And so there was a peer pressure there. So they would feel this peer pressure of, we would say, keeping up with the Joneses, to keep with the neighbours. But they weren't taught to suck that in and find out, so where can that knowledge help me? Where can the base layer of this story help me? What energy can I implement with that? So that's where I come from. So that's why you just resonate with me so much, and I love what you do. So you carry on. Sorry.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I think really, what I was trying to express earlier is there are some cultures of the world where they are still in touch with what Peter Kingsley is an English scholar who talks a lot about shamanic traditions. He wrote this book called In the Dark Places of Wisdom, which is really powerful. But he refers to these traditions, sacred traditions that were given to every culture on earth as the original instructions. And so I think there are cultures where those original instructions were still intact. In other words, the Roman Empire didn't get there and start smashing them down. So India and China still are in touch with these ancient streams that go all the way back. Now, it doesn't mean that everything has always been perfectly understood or passed down or used to help the people. And so also North America, South America, the Roman Empire didn't get there, didn't get to the Pacific Islands, didn't get to Australia, didn't get very far down into Africa. So there are cultures where there's still connection with the ancient original instructions. And then in Europe, what happened was nobody was originally literalist Christian. Yep. My grandfather came from Norway. If you go back just to 1000 AD, they were not Christian in Norway. Iceland, not until like 1100, 1200. They were worshiping a set of gods and goddesses, and it was their original instructions. And I think what has happened with this imposition of a literalist interpretation of what are actually very ancient stories. I say the New Testament should probably be called the really Old Testament. And the Old Testament should be called the Old Testament, and the New Testament should be called the even older Testament. But and it may go back to Egypt. But those literalist interpretations created a traumatic situation. I think we have a traumatized society in the West that goes all the way back to this dislocation. Not that the West, Europe didn't, create good things and, trial by peers or, music of Mozart or whatever, but there was certainly, a feudal system where a lot of people were in serfdom, and the gifts of the earth that are given, to the people were, hey, you have to cough that up to these people because of the divine right. Okay. So anyway, I do think it would probably be helpful to viewers to show some backup for what I'm saying, but I appreciate what you said, and I think that's, this externalization turns towards, okay, well, we have to if I'm unsatisfied, I have to find satisfaction outside of myself by getting this or keeping up with the Joneses, or if I just meet the right woman, or if I just put my trust in the right Jesus, then things will be okay. And it's outside of yourself. And actually, Paul says somewhere, you foolish Corinthians, don't you know that Christ is in you? That's what you're supposed to be understanding. So, I think, I appreciate what you shared, and I can show some evidence if you want, if that would be helpful.
Lovely. It'll be nice to see things like that. Yes.
Because what I'm arguing is that all the myths around the world are based on the same.
There you go.
But can he not hear me when that's off?
Fine.
No, I can hear you both all the time. I just switch
Okay, great.
because it causes echoes.
Okay, but you're able to see and hear the.
Yes,
okay, great. Well then, if you've enabled sharing, let's see. You have to. Whoever's the host has to somehow enable the sharing. I'm not exactly sure which button, but once you do that, then I'll share my screen, and I think it'll be more clear. Perfect. Okay. So I see you're sharing now, Jennifer.
Oh, sorry. Do I need to stop sharing?
I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, stop sharing. Let's see if I'm enabled. No, I still cannot yet share my screen. So there's a button somehow that you have to enable sharing. Might be up in the top under Zoom.
Enable. Sorry.
No, don't worry.
Can I just make you the host?
Great. You might be able to do that. That could work.
I'll make you the host. Yeah.
Yeah, do that.
I'll externalize that.
But you're being a great host too.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, looks like I'm the host. Let's see if I can share now.
In charge.
Okay, yep, I can share now. So I'm going to share my whole desktop here, and I've created a little. Are you seeing it yet?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Okay, so I made a little slideshow, and this is a quote I have here from this book from 1969, Hamlet's Mill, by Giorgio de Santillana and Herta von Decken, both of whom were professors towards kind of the end of their career in 1969. So they were already older when they wrote this. They'd had this long career. I think one was at MIT, one was at Columbia maybe, but they've now both passed away. But they wrote in this evocative preface to this book that the dust of centuries had settled upon the remains of this great worldwide archaic construction when the Greeks came upon the scene. Of course, the Greeks were kind of latecomers. We have the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China. There may have been ancient civilizations in the Americas that Graham Hancock believes that maybe that was even the most ancient cradle of civilization. But Hamlet's Mill was a really transformative book for me because they are pointing to this vast, they say it's like we're inside this archaic, vast, echoing ruin where there's pieces of the ruin around us, but we can't really, they didn't ever, I don't think, really get the whole picture, but their work is still very valuable because it points to the existence of this vast worldwide archaic construction that they're talking about. And it's so ancient that it already had the dust of centuries layers and layers of dust when the Greeks wandered onto the scene. Yet something of it survived in traditional rites, in myths, and in fairy tales no longer understood, but they're all tantalizing fragments of a lost whole. And then they use this metaphor. They make one think of those mist landscapes of which Chinese painters are masters, which show here a rock, here a gable, here the tip of a tree. So I put a little, what do they mean? It's actually all connected, but the connections have been obscured. Yeah. You know, we know there's something under that mist. So this should actually connect all of us. Like we were just saying a little while ago, these like Doc, you were expressing your experience of being told, oh, Durga is not real, or is just an idol. How can an idol be a god or a goddess? That is a sign of us being disconnected. What I believe is actually going on is they're all connected underneath that mist, but we've lost the connection. And so you have this hill saying to that hill, hey, you're not connected to me. You need to start looking like this. And the authors of Hamlet Mill are saying it's all connected. Yeah. But we've lost, because the ages, this is very ancient. It's already fully formed in the texts of ancient Mesopotamia that, you know, they started to recover in the early 1800s. And before they could even read the cuneiform, they had to decipher the cuneiform, just like they had to decipher the hieroglyphs. But the earliest texts, like Gilgamesh, are using this system. The earliest pyramid texts in Egypt are using this system. The Vedas, which are very ancient, are using this system.
Wow. That does details, it really does. Especially that's
very ancient. It's very ancient.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. I haven't really shown that on a podcast. I always try and, you know, maybe show something a little different, but let me show you so the authors of Hamlet's Mill tried to connect to the stars, and they did an okay job, but really I think it got me so fascinated. I became kind of obsessed with deciphering these connections in the myths. They were actually lacking the tool of, let me stop the share real quick at the risk of breaking the continuity, but they were lacking this book right here. They can clearly be seen to not be using the system of outlining the constellations that this author right here, H.A. Rey, he wrote this book in 1952. So this is called The Stars, A New Way to See Them. And thank you for ordering my new book, Jennifer. You said you ordered Myth and Trauma.
I'm going to read it cover to cover.
There's a whole chapter in there on H.A. Rey. You know what H.A. Rey also wrote? Have you heard of, with his wife, Margaret Rey.
George.
Curious George, right. Yeah. So, Curious George.
Watch that all of the time, and all of them.
Well, his outlining system, it should really be called The Stars, an Extremely Ancient Way to See Them, because we can see from ancient artwork that's still existing today that they are using this outlining of the stars. But the authors of Hamlet's Mill, I can see by their diagrams in the book, we're not using H.A. Rey's system. So they were struggling. They were saying, look, I see it's connected to the stars, but their connections, they didn't quite get the grammar and the vocabulary down.
It's that mist that they're fighting through.
But they still did something valuable by saying, I see this huge construction. And so I became fascinated, and I just kind of had to delve deeper.
Isn't it, to have those gateways that open up your mind to allow you to look,
you know, it's really interesting that Doc, you know, you were saying you came to, you know, almost a whole new life 41 years ago. I did not discover that I was fascinated by this until I was basically 39 years old.
Okay. I was going to say also the Milky Way and the Nile are connected if you go back 5,000-6,000 years ago. And the points of the pyramids is exactly the major points in the Milky Way of major stars. Yes. There are these funny connections, so there has to be some meaning. And my consultant in drug addiction, Anthony Thorley, he saw the ley lines in Newcastle. The churches were all built on ley lines. So they were also using all this Indian, what do you call it when they, which way the house should be pointing?
Right. Yeah, like feng shui. Yeah.
Vastu and feng shui in China.
Yeah.
I think in the West, never mind that Indian medical system has been removed. Even the Western old systems, like we had Vata, Pitta, Kapha, they had ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph. All that's been wiped aside because the drug companies are here. So if you're a tall, slim person, your drug dosage will be different from a short, squat, fat. But we just give the same dose to a one size fits all for commercialization. It's a bit like McDonaldization of society. Everything is the same. But we are not. We are such individuals with individual beauty. And I think as a doctor, you have to understand each person's own psyche. They are not a race or a gender. They are just so unique. Every human is so special. Every one of them.
I couldn't agree more. And I really believe that the phenomenon that you're talking about, this McDonaldization, is a part of a I think there may be some insidious parts of it in addition to just ignorant parts of it. But
I agree.
And what you're talking about too, and that you're a healer, Doc, which I really this is wonderful to get these perspectives, because the term shamanic is kind of problematic or overused or can be misinterpreted. But what you're talking about, the individual, we have these things going on in our inside world that express themselves in the outer world. I mentioned Dr. Gabor Mate. You're probably familiar with Dr. Gabor Mate. Talks about, if you have this childhood trauma that causes you to create this egoic self that's split from who you really are, and the egoic self feels that it has to be a caretaker in order to get value, or it has to, whatever it has to do in order to get value, it can release, hormones, fight or flight type hormones that are helpful if you're being chased by, a tiger or a criminal or something. But if you're putting those out into your body 24/7 or practically 24/7, it's going to have physical results that are damaging. So the reason I brought up the shamanic is they are, which I think around the world, even in the Bible, you have passages where Daniel says, I was on my face for 3 days in the spirit. What is he talking about? He's going into this other realm, but going into help people with these issues that they have that separate them from themselves. These Dr. Richard Schwartz in the IFS system talks about these parts, this part of me or that part of you that is, I have this part that's a protector. To deal with that internal family, he talks about internal family systems, is almost a shamanic technique of, hey, we have to deal with each individual person's situation. It can't be mass produced.
No.
So I think that was such a insightful point.
Sorry, but when I go with anybody with any kind of spiritual guidance, for instance, somebody that is drinking excessively, but we want to find out, I'll go right back to the womb and sort of describe it as that spiral time rather than that linear time of, we need to have the past here, the present here, and the future here, all on top.
That's right.
I'm going to take you where you are right now back to the womb, and we're going to work our way up from there to find out where you can speak to your inner child as a safe adult at the point that this got in, that you're trying to cover up with alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be. And that's how I so I think that's sort of what you're saying, isn't it? That you do go with the very much individual and go in that individual inner journey, but you know that you can do it, that you can bring the past right up to here and go right into it here and affect the future here and go right into
right.
here. So
you're both healers. So I'm not, but what I'm trying to say is, look at this tremendous resource. Look at this tremendous resource of the myths that we can use ourselves and that people who are healers can use. I mean, why would we not avail ourselves of this precious inheritance that was given to all the cultures of the earth for our benefit?
Oh, yeah.
But it can also be used negatively, just like medicine can be used negatively, or martial arts could be used to protect people, or it could be used to oppress people or brutalize people or bully people. So that's what I think is actually going on. And so let me go back to showing some of the evidence. But now I've said all these, grandiose things, and people might be saying, what on earth is he talking about? They're all connected to the stars. I agree with Doc too. There was also a system of ley lines, this understanding of the Earth's energy, which some cultures retained. The British obviously had it. If you have all these ley lines in England, that ancient culture had it.
Yeah.
But then they went off and started colonizing these other places. And when they went to China and wanted to build a railroad, the city leaders or the elders would come and say, well, hold on, you can't put the tunnel through that mountain because there's a dragon tail right there. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. And they would say, what? Okay, well, we'll go around, I guess. They had this whole system is connected to everything, to our body, to the earth, the arrangement of our houses. It's multi-layered, but it's definitely connected to the stars, and that shows that it's not literal. It shows that it doesn't mean it's not true. That's what I always try and stress. I'm not saying the Bible's not true. I'm saying it's not literal. It's got truth in there. So, whoops, I pressed the wrong button. Let me share back to my screen and show you what I mean by it's based on the stars. So it's a big subject. So I'm just going to dive into one constellation here, but I'll start with Zeus. We can see this is Zeus because the ancient artist has even written the name of Zeus. He's on the left as we face the screen. That looks like a capital I is their ancient Z, or the Greek Z. So we know that's Zeus right there, and he's fighting this, one of his strongest adversaries, Typhon. Now the painting is a little damaged, but you can see he's holding up over his head a big thunderbolt. Yes. Can you see the thunderbolt raised over his head? This is actually an artist's rendition of what it used to look like, so I'll put that there. You can see Zeus is in this deep knee bend. One arm is over his head with this powerful thunderbolt. One arm is reaching out towards Typhon. Typhon has a torso of a man, but serpents down below. Two serpents, actually, where his legs would be are two serpents, and he has wings. And Zeus eventually couldn't slay Typhon. He had to put a mountain on top of Typhon, and historically, traditionally, it's believed to be Mount Etna, which is why Etna is still a volcano to this day, because Typhon is down there trapped, and every now and then he spews up lava onto the earth. But look at the postures. This is a very distinctive match to constellations in the heavens, very important constellations. The constellation Hercules up above and Ophiuchus down below. Ophiuchus means the serpent holder, and that constellation has kind of looks almost like a tombstone or a gateway, kind of a central obelisk shape with two serpents on either side. Yes. And then up above, you can see Hercules. Now look at the outline of Hercules. This is how H.A. Ray recommends you envision Hercules. And I'm convinced this is the way the ancients envision Hercules, because look at Zeus. But let's just start with Ophiuchus. It's actually a little more difficult to see, but the faint legs of Ophiuchus, if you just kind of block them out, which I just did, you could also imagine Ophiuchus as having a torso terminating in two serpentine legs. Do you see how that could be? Yeah. Are you tracking with what I'm trying to argue here? Yes. Or if you think of the Starbucks.
I can see very clearly.
You know the symbol of Starbucks, where we have the mermaid and she has two fishy tails going to either side?
Yes.
That's the same constellation of the siren, or the mermaid, is related to this Ophiuchus. So
just quickly ask you, and I don't want to take you off track anymore.
That's okay. No, go ahead.
Your time's precious. But
go ahead.
That's interested me for a long time, because it's sort of, I listen to a couple of astrologers that I really trust. They really get, like, they're really nitty gritty like you. I'm going to email them and say they need to interview you, because that would be interesting. But they don't cover, they speak of Ophiuchus a little bit, if I'm saying it correctly, a little bit,
Yeah, yeah,
this hidden sign. And is there
yes, that's right.
mechanism that you know of, like that, that's been deliberately done so, by
Yes.
a system that limits information?
This is an excellent question.
Okay.
This is an excellent question. So what I think what you're asking, Jennifer, is this concept of the 13th zodiac sign, because Ophiuchus, actually the ecliptic path of the planets and the sun goes through the legs of Ophiuchus. So Ophiuchus is part of the zodiac, but not part of the zodiac, is a hidden sign. And this is in, actually, in the book that you're getting talks about how important Ophiuchus is. So is connected to the zodiac, but not connected to the zodiac. And this has to do, I think, with what meditation is about. Is we want to be connected, but also disconnected from these parts of ourselves that cause us to react automatically like a robot.
Okay.
Okay, so if you can create some space and say, why did I get this feeling that I must say this? Or why did I get so threatened right there? You have now stepped back rather than just, someone cuts you off in traffic and you have this explosion.
Trigger.
And 5 minutes later, you say, why? What? Oh, that was so awful. What came over me? If at that time you can sit back and say, well, now why suddenly am I being triggered? You've gotten slight distance apart. And actually in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna over and over says to Arjun, you have to act without acting, or you have to do as if you're not doing.
That's
And also
work, isn't it? You have to work without being connected to the action or the fruits at the end of it. Is that right in the Bhagavad?
I think that's right. That's right. Do what's right without fear for the outcome or without greed for the outcome.
You're not owning the action. You don't own
Yeah.
it. You just do it. And you're
Right.
not doing it. Like you mentioned earlier, you talked about the Greek muses. One very famous American writer whose name I forget. She wrote the first book and it was a total sellout. Someone said, "What happens if you don't win it? Win the next time?" She says, "I'm not writing. The muses are writing." Just like in India, they say, "I'm not singing. Saraswati is singing through my tongue," and that detaches you from the action. Instead of I'm doing it, I'm just the pathway. Somebody else is doing it to somebody. Like when you do some good to people, they say, "Oh, you're wonderful," and you start blowing up, getting bigger and bigger. The ego really pumps up until somebody comes and pricks it with some daft thing. So it's better to say, "Well, I did my bit." When I was a kid, I used to think, "What a show off." Everyone's saying, "You did it." He's saying, "I didn't do it." But now I begin to understand it's better to do that than say, "I'm the master of all I survey." But that the ego comes in, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think what it is saying is act from self. And self, I think, is connected to when you say Saraswati sang through me, it's because that is how we get in touch with the wider realm. When Odysseus hears the voice of the goddess saying, "Hey, be careful, before you go there, you better understand that this is what happens at Circe's palace, or this is what happens at he's hearing the voice of the gods because he's connected to his higher self or his authentic self.
Doc, sorry, there's a little bit of feedback.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that is a very perceptive question. Ophiuchus, I believe, is like the pivot. Ophiuchus is so critical of a figure, and we'll see how critical of a figure. Maybe if, I can show it a little bit in a second. But first, let me just show you, because it's at first it may seem that's a bit of a stretch that's Hercules. The constellation is set up with Zeus, but so the harder one to see is actually that Typhon is connected to Ophiuchus. So if you've seen that, then let's look at Hercules. Look at the outline of Hercules, the weapon raised over the head, very large weapon.
Yeah.
A deep knee bend. Look at a deep knee bend with the heel raised and the arm stretching out. The other arm is reaching forward. You see the other arm reaching towards Typhon. It is really connected to the posture of Zeus. And so thunderbolt wielding gods in all these cultures are, I have found, almost invariably connected to the constellation Hercules. So in the myths of ancient India, who has the thunderbolt weapon? Do you know, Jennifer or Doc?
I don't know.
Is it Indra, the rain god?
Yes, yes, Indra, the rain god, exactly. So I have a picture here. This is the biggest figure in this picture is not Indra, but Vishnu.
Wow.
And this is from Angkor Wat, actually, in Cambodia, one of the largest, or if not the largest, temple complex in the world. Indra, this is the churning of the ocean of milk, Amrita. The churning on the left, there are the Asura, and on the right are the Devas, and they're doing this tug of war, and in between the pivot is Vishnu, on top of his tortoise avatar, who I think is Kurna. But up above, can you see up above?
Yes.
Who is that? That is Indra. Indra is pouring down rain, it looks like.
Yes, you can see.
There's like rain pouring down, but Indra, this is identified as Indra on the, the website where I took this from Wikipedia, but that is Indra up above Vishnu. And look at the posture of Indra. You see how the distinctive outline of the legs.
That's
Indra is
even closer again, isn't it?
He is connected to the constellation Hercules. That's why he wields the Vajra, the thunderbolt weapon. And also those are the I forget the names of these heavenly beings. Look at
Devtas.
Yes.
Devtas.
It does start with a D. That's probably who they are. Yeah. And they are dancing in the same posture with those legs like that. And they have a crown on their head. So you see how Hercules has a square-shaped head. So many cultures have the thunderbolt wielding deity has a full beard, like Zeus has a big square beard. Thor has a big square beard. This is in a Maya codex. And he does not have a big square beard, but he has a square-shaped hat. And look at that thunderbolt. The thunderbolt is very similar to the thunderbolt we saw in the Zeus. There's Zeus. Look at the posture similarities. I would argue that we're talking about an ancient system where this particular constellation of Hercules is connected with certain characteristics, often with like the most powerful weapon, with the rain and thunder. Zeus is a thunder god, Indra is a rain god, storm gods. Marduk from ancient Mesopotamia is also associated with the constellation Hercules. But it can be hard to see at first until you get kind of this understanding of these myths are using the heavens, which are infinite themselves, to teach us about the real infinite realm. You cannot see the infinite realm, but you can see the infinite realm of the heavens. So the heavens are a perfect way of conveying the truth about the infinite realm that we can't see, because there are Zeus figures and there are Durga figures. They have different names in different cultures, but they're inside of us, and they're also out there in the invisible realm. So here's a picture this is from the 1800s. It's an engraving, but maybe you can see what this is a picture of. This is from the book of Genesis. It's the famous episode of where someone goes to sleep with his head on a rock and has a vision of a ladder stretching to heaven.
Yeah,
is Jacob's ladder. Now look at the angels are going up and down on the ladder,
Yeah.
and look at the figure of the Almighty up at top. See how he's reaching out with one arm,
Yeah.
bending forward, full beard. He's not raising a thunderbolt over his head, but he does have, look over his head, he has this kind of arching kind of cloak.
Yeah.
So this is the Milky Way is the stairway to heaven is always depicted with these kind of clouds, the same rift as the Milky Way. Oh, you mentioned earlier, Doc, that the Milky Way lines up with the Nile in Egypt. I would argue it also lines up with all these rivers in myth, like the Ganges that flows down from the hair of Shiva, right? The Ganges, and the river Yamuna. Sometimes someone has to go meditate by the river Yamuna, and then Vishnu will appear to them. This river is associated with the Milky Way. It can be a river. It could be a pillar of fire. It could be a pillar of clouds. But the angels going up and down on the ladder are probably those two winged figures of Cygnus and Aquila, the swan and the eagle. But look at the similarities between the God figure and Hercules again.
Yes, you can see
You
the
see that? And even above the sleeping head of Jacob, you see a mountain almost directly above his elbow there.
Yes.
There's almost always a mountain there because Ophiuchus can look like a mountain. See how Ophiuchus can look like a mountain?
I can, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is a celestial scene. And in this case, the artist has depicted Jacob kind of in the position where Scorpio is. Sometimes Jacob is depicted with Scorpio characteristics, sometimes with Sagittarius, but those are two constellations at the base of the Milky Way. So
Wow.
the Milky Way, like this cloud, this stretches up. So this is from Genesis 28.
Scorpio, isn't it, with this illustration, because the way he's lying.
I'm trying to show the connection to the stars, if you can see that. Here's Thor with his thunderbolt. He's attacking a Jotun. Thor, there's not that many, the Norse didn't make any real statues that have survived, so this is a modern statue. But the reason Thor is always smiting a Jotun is because Jotuns, just like Typhon was associated with Ophiuchus, Jotuns are often associated with Ophiuchus. They're right below Hercules in the heavens. This is a god from Africa of the Yoruba people. This is the god Shango. He has an axe instead of a hammer, but it's the same constellation over and over. And sometimes it'll be the son of a Hercules figure. Like Zeus is lined up with Hercules, but his son Heracles or Hercules is also associated with that same constellation, and he is the son of Zeus. And look at how Hercules has his arm over his head. The vase kind of curves away, but you can see, even though it's curved, you can see he's got this big sword, which he's holding over his head, and he's reaching out an arm. He's got his feet in the same position as the Hercules, and then this is the battle of Heracles with the Amazonian, the women warriors of the Amazons. He's reaching out. Sometimes he'll even be reaching out and grabbing the crest of the helmet. You see how she has that very distinctive crest of the helmet right there? There's actually in front of Hercules, I didn't draw it in here, but there's a arc of stars called the Northern Crown. It's right in front of Hercules. I could show it. I'll just try and annotate with this little drawing here. Let me see, where's my pen? Oh, there it is. So where is it? Oops, I just drew right through it. Right here, this is the Northern Crown. It's right there. I should erase it. See how there's this crest? There's crest in the, let me erase this. Here. Anyway, I should have shown it, but there's a crest right above where he's reaching out his arm in the painting, in the ancient painting, and there's a arc of stars right above where he's reaching out his arm in the sky, and that plays a role in certain myths as well. But I'll just keep going to show a couple more here.
Thank you.
I lost my mouse, but let's see. How do I pause? Sorry about that.
This is so amazing. This blows me.
does it make sense that what I'm showing?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
there was so much connection between all these cultures saying the same thing over and over again. Do you think that human beings are connected and you don't have to, I mean, the Mayans didn't have to go to India to learn, the Indians didn't have to go somewhere else to learn, the Greeks didn't have to copy that. They're just connected, aren't they?
that's so I don't know how this happened. But I like, you know, it's like we're detectives coming onto this scene with these clues. And I said, ooh, this is a complex situation here. We have we have these myths all around the world. So it could have happened by some culture going around to all these other cultures. I don't think that's what happened because, like I said, it's already in place with ancient Egypt, with ancient Mesopotamia, with ancient India. It's already in their most ancient scriptures and texts. So it could be that it's one very ancient culture that got destroyed, and then these are memories in different places. Or it could also be what you just said, Doc. It could be that humans, when we go into an altered state, let's say with psilocybin or with deep meditation or tantra or something, and we go to this other state, the way we are taught about this other world, the way the other world chooses to disclose it to us is in this pattern, this worldwide pattern. You know, you get when people go on ayahuasca, which I have not done, but I hear very similar kind of descriptions. People say, "Oh, did you see the small, you know, lizard people that tell you they made everything?" Yeah, they always say that. It's like, well, how are people having the same experience? It's like the other realm chooses to explain itself to us, maybe in the same way. So it's possible that all these imagery or the stars somehow were downloaded to us that way. That's a possibility.
With an iPhone 10, I was in Lahore Fort. I mean, these are not places of worship. They're places of killing and murder and rape and all that. Anyway, so there's a young lady who took me there, and I was just showing her on my screen, you could see bubbles rising. And I kept telling the fellow who lived there, who was a great musician, come and see. He just refused to see it. I said, can you not see that bubble going up? And can you not see that bubble going down? Oh, he says an artifact. I said, no, I'm a photographer. I know what artifacts are. But do you think we are so closed with science, Newtonian science, that we refuse to look beyond, even if it's so visible to some of us?
I think that's absolutely going on. I think that's absolutely that we close. I think actually there's probably parts of us, some of us, that want to defend us from something that so blows apart the paradigm that we've been taught that won't let us see certain things.
Going back to your trauma book, The Myth and the Trauma, in that I think sometimes the most abused children will cling on to the abusive mother, in that it's still been a safe place. So when you got into Christianity at 21, for whatever reason in your life, it felt like a safe place, and you stayed for quite some time because it became a safe place. And no doubt it was a bit difficult to pull yourself away from that. Like it was, I saw people in my family almost have a breakdown over it. I see people who come to me, and I realize that it's become a safe place, which is why I don't attack it. I just try and see what I see, and very much so what you describe as it being a much more eternal message that can't be fenced or crossed in. It's an ever flowing.
And it is there to help us. But the like I mentioned, Richard Schwartz, who's a doctor who talks about internal family systems, some of these blockages are actually trying to protect us, or they're all actually there trying to protect us. So what a shaman will do, or what he will do in his practice, is talk to that part of us and say, now, why are you protecting me from this? And he said, well, because of this. Well, thank you so much for your devotion to, but actually I don't need that anymore. But another thing that you said, Doc, about the Newtonian, when did that all arise? This very hard scientific, that became almost a religion, that probably did become a very dogmatic religion. It became, when did it really arise, is when the power of the church over more and more people started to wane, and it's like, well, what we need is something. This stuff is very powerful. So you can miss it in a few different ways. You can miss it by taking the Bible literally, but if that starts to wear off, you can also miss it by a whole nother way, by saying, oh, that's a bunch of old superstition. They were trying to explain how a volcano got there, or why there's thunder, and we don't need that anymore. Now we have science. And that's a whole nother way to miss the power of this gift that we've been given in the myths. So I think that arose at the same time that this the literalism was starting to wear off. A new kind of literalism cropped up. Sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, no. I think there's an old saying that my granny used to say, Doc, you'll know it. It's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it's, you know, in the farming.
Do you know how that term came?
Yes,
when water was precious and heating was precious.
Well, everybody had to go through the biggest generation, the father, then
Yes.
the next stage. So the baby was last in probably quite a big family. And so by the time the baby was in the bath, it was black. So you could very easily throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think it's important to not throw babies out with dirty bathwater just because some people have tainted it or tried to fence it off for themselves or limit it to a point for the collective, not to go ahead and throw that baby out with the dirty bathwater just because some of it was tainted, or one person that was teaching it was a bit tainted, maybe through their own ego or for their own through the subconscious or through the knowing, doing it knowingly. To not throw babies out with bathwater. That I always come back to that with everything. You know, there's some good things in modern medicine. There's great things in modern technology. Look at us all talking, and you're way over there. We're way here, and so. But then there's bad things with all of those too. And so to really pick out what we can use for good, and not write it all off by throwing it out with dirty bathwater. So that's
for sure. That's for sure. And I do say that people who want to take, I think you miss something if you take it literally. But if someone is taking it literally and it helps them, and they're not using it to harm someone or try and use it to justify violating someone else's human rights.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it has been used that way, but it doesn't mean that everybody who is taking it literally is using it that way. So if somebody is taking it literally, and I'm not running around trying to force this information on people who don't want to see it, but there are people who have been harmed and are looking for, who say, oh, this is so helpful to me because I was brought up in this, kind of this fear of hell was always held over my head, and they find it very helpful to see that it's actually metaphorical. So let me drive on with the presentation if that's good. Or
sorry, yes.
No, not at all. I mean, we don't have to get through all of this, but I just put in lots of stuff that we could use as fodder for our meal to talk about. But am I sharing again? Can you see it?
Sharing, yes.
Great. So I wanted to show Hercules, or the Heracles figure, actually in Mahabharata. There's a very strong, powerful, the 5 Pandava brothers. Doc, I don't know, in India, I think.
The 5 Pandavas as well, and the Kauravas and the blind father. And
yes.
I may be real characters, but I actually see them as me. I can be the Pandava, I can be the Draupadi, I can be the Krishna, I can, actually started relating everything to me. And I'll quickly tell you, I interviewed the most famous Facebooker of Pakistan this morning, and he said something beautiful. He said, the ego is the firewall that protects us from bad stuff coming in. But unfortunately, the firewall is so strong that no new knowledge comes either. So this firewall is killing us off. And I thought, what a lovely modern interpretation of the ego.
Yes, that is beautiful. That is so, I think, so in line with the ancient myths. It's like the ego is protecting us, but it's not just a firewall. It's almost an old firewall that was, you know, coded in the 80s when we were children, or 70s, and we're still using it. And it's like, why does that thing keep popping up on my computer? It's so ancient. But in the 5 Pandavas, there's one who is very like Hercules. I put this right after the Hercules picture because Hercules, he strangles 2 serpents when he's a baby. Hercules does. This one of the 5 Pandavas.
Is that him?
Yes, Beam.
The
So
big
Beam,
fellow.
this actually is called the Beam Gate. I think it is in, oh, I don't know. I haven't been to India yet, but this is, you can find Bhima's Gate or the Beam Gate, and look.
It be in India, in Haryana, in
Yes.
Kurukshetra.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, yes, but the battle of, yes. So this, look at the outline of Beam here. See how he's portrayed in this sculpture. Look at his mace over his head. The weapon of Beam is a big mace, just like Thor has a big hammer, and Hercules has a big club, and Zeus has a thunderbolt, and Shango from Africa has a big axe. This is very clear parallel to this constellation. And also Beam is holding up he has like a lotus in his other hand. You see his lotus in his other hand?
Yes.
See what Hercules, the constellation, is reaching down towards with his other hand? See, he has one hand over his head with a big mace or a big club. He's reaching down towards Ophiuchus there.
Wow.
You see that?
Yeah.
That is the serpent of Ophiuchus, can take on many different forms in myth, and sometimes it can be a lotus. See how he's reaching down to pick the lotus?
It's so like the shape on Ophiuchus, though, isn't it? At the end there, the lotus itself, you could fit it into that diagram of the star system there.
Yes. So I think when we see, you know, these a lotus growing out of the navel of Vishnu as he reclines on the multi-headed serpent in the ocean. You see down there, Ophiuchus is on top of Scorpio. It has multiple heads, and he has a lotus growing out of his navel.
Wow.
So this is in Bolivia, Tiwanaku in South America. This is also a gate. So the Beam Gate has this figure of Beam on it. In India, this is this gate called the Gate of the Sun. I should have put a picture of the whole portal, but it's very famous. You can find it easily on the internet. It's called the Puerta del Sol, or the Gate of the Sun at Tiwanaku. It's an ancient gate shape, and you can see there those little figures. There's a figure holding 2 kind of parallel thunderbolts or weapons or whatever he's holding above a gate. And then you've got all those little figures that are also in the shape of Hercules with the crown. You see their deep knee bend.
The knee bend, yeah.
So this is worldwide. It's very ancient. So the myths, I would argue, are additional evidence, just like this ancient architecture is evidence that there was some kind of ancient knowledge that was worldwide, that was very sophisticated, but it's been forgotten.
Yeah.
It's been forgotten. Oh, here's Hanuman. Am I saying that right, Doc?
Perfect. You say it better than the Hare Krishnas. They say Hanuman. Actually, to be very honest, your diction is one of the best I've seen in a white person.
Oh, thank you so much.
They Saraswati, they'll say Hanuman. You actually got it right. I'm impressed.
Well, it's tricky to know where the syllable goes unless you've studied it, but I do ask people. And, you know, I like to look on, you know, there's a lot of YouTube of Mahabharata movies, you know, in Hindi. You can watch, you know, I can watch the Pandavas and the Kauravas and have the subtitles, and I can hear how they say, oh, you know, Dhritarashtra or something. So I try and copy as much as I can from YouTube if I can find it. But But actually Beam is connected to Hanuman, right?
Okay.
They're brothers, or they're partly brothers. They're both descended from the same wind god, Vayu.
He's
And
called Pavan Putra Hanuman. Pavan means wind. Pavan Putra Hanuman, the
And
son
isn't
of.
that interesting? Isn't that interesting that Indra, who we saw is connected to this constellation, is a rain god, and Thor is a thunder god, and Zeus is also a sky god, a storm god. These are gods of the wind. So this constellation is also connected to the wind. So Bhim and Hanuman actually come into contact in Mahabharata at one point, and you know, Bhim tries to move Hanuman's tail out of the way, and he can't move it. And he's like, "What's going on? How come I can't move his tail?" And Hanuman says, "Actually, I'm your brother. I'm a god. That's why you can't move my tail. But we're actually both descended from the god of wind, so we're actually related." And you see that Hanuman is in the same posture as the constellation Hercules. Again, the tail arching up over his head could connect to that the weapon.
Yeah.
But also the favored weapon of Hanuman is a mace. And in one story, he has to bring back these herbs from a mountain in the Himalayas, or the Himalayas.
Well,
And
Lakshman, brother of Ram, was dying.
yes,
And told Hanuman to go and get a certain herb. And the fellow
yes,
couldn't know the herb, so he just pulled up the mountain and said, "Here you are, look for the herb yourself."
yes, exactly. So he brings back the whole mountain. Now look at Hercules above Ophiuchus. And remember what I said earlier, that Ophiuchus can sometimes play a mountain in the myths. And Hercules is up there reaching down to pick up the mountain and bring it back. You see how Ophiuchus could look like a mountain?
Yeah.
So all
And
these myths.
way to heaven picture, there was also a
Yes.
small mountain behind the sleeping head.
Yes, in the right position for the constellations. That's exactly right. So this is around the world. These myths are, oh, here's David and Goliath from the Bible. So David slays Goliath, and then he uses the sword of the giant. This is a painting from 1616, so it's not ancient, but it's not modern either. I mean, it's early modern, around the same time as Shakespeare. And look at what the artist has depicted David in the outline of the constellation Hercules. Can you see that?
Absolutely.
I can move my, oops.
Even for tarot, interestingly,
Oops.
swords are the ether, the words, the wind, you know. So
Yes.
he's holding a sword there still represents this wind, this
Yes.
sky.
Yes. And I can show you why they're related to the wind, because it does relate to the constellations. But the thing I wanted to show on David here with Goliath is look at the foot of Hercules. You see in this, he's doing this big striding posture, how the foot of Hercules is near the head of Ophiuchus.
Mm-hmm.
Ophiuchus can play a role of a giant. Like I was saying, Thor is always smiting the Jotuns, who are giants. See how his foot is on the head of Goliath there, and you see how the foot of Hercules is on the head of Ophiuchus.
Yeah.
And you can see, if you look very closely at the bottom of the painting, you can see what is the famous weapon that Goliath uses. Is actually, the Bible actually tells us his spear is like a weaver's beam. His spear is so huge, it's like a weaver's beam, it's called in the text. Well, Ophiuchus figures usually carry a spear, and that's because you can see that it's almost like Ophiuchus is holding two spears. And in some parts of the Iliad, for instance, there'll be a warrior who's carrying two spears who is connected to Ophiuchus. In fact, Hector, the strongest warrior from Troy, carries two spears, and one of the spears has a hoop on the end. You can see the hoop on the end of Ophiuchus's other spear there. But you see why Goliath is carrying a spear, because he's associated with Ophiuchus. David is associated with Hercules, and he's about to cut off the head of Goliath. So this is across cultures. Anyway, so I'll stop. These are all the different books that I've written after. I was going to just say, what does this all mean? I'm grasping towards what it could mean in all of these books. I didn't even start off seeing all these connections in the Bible. I started off taking the Bible literally, but seeing some connections to the stars in other myths. And it was a big change for me to see it in the Bible. But all these books I've written, I'm learning more and more about the system and trying to understand, well, what if it doesn't mean literal, the story of Moses can be shown to be in the stars, where crossing of the Red Sea has to do with crossing the Milky Way. There's a part of the Milky Way where he's extending his rod towards it, and there's a path across the Milky Way. So if it's not about literal, then what's it about? And that's where it comes back to all these things that we're talking about. Like your friend's metaphor is perfect of this firewall, the egoic mind that keeps us from the self, from our true self. That's what I think it's.
Do you feel evolution of a human being, you, me, Jennifer, anybody? In the beginning, you need very strong rules. This is right, that is wrong. Because children can't really grasp the totality and the fuzzy border and the fuzzy logic, and sometimes killing may be right. And sometimes, that's too complicated for a child. So in the beginning, you need rules, rules, rules. As you get older, you should be allowed to think outside the box. Because as a doctor, your brain has three parts. There's a hind brain, which is 5%, which is just about survival. It's called a snake brain. A snake will eat its own egg if it's hungry. In the middle, there's 10% of the group brain, which is the brain that is about growth, procreation, and so on. But the 85%, the 6 out of 7 parts of the brain, the walnut, is for growing outside the box. So if you are in a religion, if you are into nationalism, if you are into ageism, any ism, you're in the 10% of your brain. How about ascending that and going into the 85%? And do you think as you are growing, as I'm growing, as Jennifer is growing, as everyone else is growing, we are just ascending in our own heads, never mind the stars and Zeus or Hanuman. To me, they are the same person. They're archetypes to me. So I'm also Zeus, but I'm also the devil. There's no good and bad, really, is there? Except from the point of view. Like medically, the drug is not designed because aspirin takes away headache. One of the side effects of aspirin is it kills my headache. So we call it a good effect. One of the effects we don't like is stomach upset. We call it a bad effect. Aspirin says, excuse me, both are effects, they're neither good nor bad. It's how you make it, isn't it? How we interpret it. So whether it's medicine or nursing, as Jennifer has practiced, or your strict Christianity, etc., we all grow, and there's a possibility, and which is, I believe, infinite.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very, very well said. Hi.
This is Theodore.
I'm glad you could join us.
He's woken
Hi.
up. This is Theodore. This is David.
Hi, Theodore.
Say hi. He's in America. He's just scared all at once. He's woken up. That's okay. You can stay with him.
Oh, yeah.
So,
nice to see you. Sorry I'm taking so long.
no.
But I think that's a really, and I think that all these different, these different parts, like you said, is inside of us. These different, Zeus, but also Ares, who is a very troublemaking god. But, that there is a part of me that is that, and we are plural. And the myths actually show that we're plural. I've mentioned, some of these psychologists, that when I found the things that some of these cutting edge psychologists like Gabor Mate or Richard Schwartz are talking about, I said, that's amazing, because these most ancient myths are talking about us being plural, where there are these pairs in the myths, like the twins, Nakula and Sahadev. I probably didn't say that exactly right, but
Nakula and Sahadev.
Nakula and Sahadev.
Sahadev,
so,
the two young ones, yes.
Sahadev, yes. But so they're twins. But there's also Arjun and Krishna are really the doubting self and the higher self, for sure. Because Arjun, before the battle of Kurukshetra, is doubting. He says, I don't even know. I think I'll just sit down on the ground, and I don't know what the right thing to do is. He's the most powerful. He's been to heaven to get the most powerful weapons.
But being asked to kill his own guru.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so painful. When you watch Mahabharata, I was actually crying watching his pain of having to kill his guru.
Mm.
But what is he killing? He's killing his ignorance, isn't it? His
Mm.
own ignorance. His guru represents his ego gone bad, batting for the wrong side.
Yes, that's
And in his
powerful.
compassion, puts them on a bed of arrows and then makes a hole and gives him water to drink. They are
Yes.
very powerful and painful scenes to watch, you know.
Yes, and I think it's very clear in the ancient myths that they are talking about what's going on inside of us when there are these different the twins. They're not actually two people. It's actually you, your egoic mind that's doubting, like that firewall that your friend that you interviewed today, Doc, was saying, keeps us from access to parts of ourself, actually our most authentic part of ourself. And that is in the story of doubting Arjun, or the story of doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas is he has these doubts, but Jesus doesn't say to Thomas, oh, you're so terrible. You're my worst disciple. Get out of here, or I'm just going to obliterate you. No, he has compassion, and he says, here, touch, stop doubting, stop throwing your mind into the past or into the future. Just come to the present and touch and believe. It's a connection back to our authentic self. But the egoic mind, the doubting mind, keeps us from that. Yeah. But it's developed to protect us, because of this world that we're in. And some people, it can, in the more traumatic of a society, the more dysfunctional some of these mechanisms, these algorithms, these firewalls can become. But I think the fact that they're in these ancient myths shows that it's pretty much universal to our situation. So we all
ago, Matt Hudson, a hypnotherapist, was telling us about a patient who had who had no left hand but had phantom pain in it. So Matt Hudson transferred the pain to his right hand, and then he could deal with it. Wow. Yesterday was the birthday of Amitabh Bachchan, 77-year-old man, and I listened all day to him. I had a bit of a kidney pain, so I thought I'd just lie down and get better. So I was watching him, and he said the story. His father was absolutely the last wonderful writer in India, in Hindi. He also studied Keats in Oxford, etc., by the way. So one day he said to his father, why is your left hand in so much pain, Dad? What's happening? He said, I've written so much with my right hand that it's in pain. I've transferred mentally the pain from the right hand to my left hand, so I can allow my right hand to keep writing. And these things are real, you know. I had a chap called Peter Kinsley, a patient of mine, just another Geordie guy, simple guy. And he meditated so much, he went to the dentist to have a tooth extraction and didn't take any anesthetic. Just a normal English guy. He's no Swami sitting on Mount Everest. So ordinary people are now accessing these kind of things, and I venerate them for it.
Yeah. Well, I think
that's awesome.
I think we can all agree that nothing should be labeled as within self. I mean, when you're dealing with self and in different experiences, as bad as or good, that you can use them at the right time. Because like you say, when you're going through a very traumatic experience, maybe as a child, the kind of experiences as adults I don't need to describe right now, you know that there is that protection mechanism that saves that child's life in that moment, where they can switch off and turn off and put a block on what is happening. But then at a later date, to get into that balanced situation and to find a way of revisiting that child and taking that cap off, because it's a safe place to do so now, because they've had the knowledge of a certain energy that helps them deal with it now and gives them the capacity and weapons to use against it, to slay those beasts, to slay those things that hold you back. And I just think, David, what you do, Doc knows I adore him and respect him greatly, but David, what you do and the way you're evolving with your books and the work that you're putting together, especially with the visuals, because I look up to the starry sky. My daughter has horses, so where we go, there's no lights really. So on a night time, I lie down. I get dirty most times I'm there. I lie down and I just keep staring. And there's a layer, and then another layer, and then another layer that becomes apparent. Now, the longer I stare, if I just glance up, it's very beautiful, it's gorgeous, and I feel like a kid again doing the same thing on the flat roof at home. But when I start staring for longer, my perception gets wider. It goes up another layer, and it goes up another layer, and it goes up another layer. You see more and more layers of these beautiful stars, and it does something within me. It takes me back to childhood of thinking, wow, what are you? And now I know that you are part of me, you know, as this, as above, so below. I can use these constellations, I can use the energies within them. So what you do with the visuals, I feel, to just free people up and let them know that nothing, there's no babies being thrown out with bathwater, you know, we're not trying to affect or trigger that ego or that egoic place. We're just trying to expand the fact that as a collective, if we can get past those firewalls, if we can get past that manufactured, I feel to a great extent personally, dividing that's been going on with these different labels of these different organized religions, the kind of power that within that gives me goosebumps, that with the connection and the understanding, and goodness knows what kind of reality being unveiled with all of that. We already see such beauty in the stars and in the grass below. What do we see when that perception of those layers of stars that I see, the more I stare, do we get when we can really connect together and share these stories that are the same throughout and have the same messages throughout and exchange ideas and ideals from them. So what you do is so important, and I can't thank you enough for spending so much time with us and listening to us talk too. I appreciate you greatly, and I send you fantastic energy. And
I would like to add the same thing. I'm taken back to my St. Xavier's Patna when I had a book from looking at the stars, and I know Betelgeuse, and I know the Sword of Orion, and you just take me back about 50 years, you know, and more than that, 60 years. At my age, 10 years more or less doesn't matter, you know. And it's just becoming a child again. It's just becoming curious again, and becoming a wow again instead of, oh yeah, I know that. So learning is about, and being young is about learning and unlearning, and learning and unlearning. So I really respect you for that. And I didn't realize you had written so many books. So I'm so honored that you've done such a thing. And your drawings are so wonderful. You can't but see the connection between the Bean Gate and that person in Bolivia, or that person in Greek mythology, or anywhere. They're all the same, really. So you really bring it all together. Thank you extremely much.
Well, thank you both for those very kind words. I really, you know, you're thanking me, but I grow through these conversations, of course. This has been very beneficial to me to talk to both of you, and to hopefully we'll do it again soon. And I really enjoyed both of the things that you both said, Doc, where you were talking about this, you know, patient who is able through meditation to, you know, do these, go through a dental procedure, or the writer who could transfer. That, I think, is one of the things about seeing the myths in the stars. It makes us realize, okay, that's not just a story about, okay, Beam, strongest man in the world, but I'm not him, so it's not really about me. Or Solomon, oh, he's so wise, but well, great for him, but what does that do for me? No, it's actually a story about you. It's actually, it is about you. And we can see that it's about you. And also what you were saying, Jennifer, about how could the world be better? And earlier, Doc, you were saying, you know, when people get so caught up in nationalism or this or that ism, I think that probably a lot of that does have to do with these defense mechanisms that have gotten out of control. You know, I was in the military. I was very, you know, I had very different political views when I was 21 than I have today, and those have evolved. But why did I believe this or that? It was a certain defense mechanism of trying to protect from danger or something. But the more we live from self, I think, or the more that we can get in touch with ourself, the more we can understand one another as well. So
David,
I really appreciate everything you said.
we're going to promote the heck out of your books. I know Doc will also do that. He loves books and information within books and words. And my daughter will be doing the same. I'll be asking everybody, prodding them to promote your books and things. But where else can they find you? How can they get in touch with you? How can they support you? You just reel that all off. And
oh yeah, great, thanks. I'll show it on the screen here real quick. My websites and things are on. Yeah, I had lots of other, we'll have to talk again, but let's see here.
I would
yeah,
love that.
there we go.
Free anytime.
Yeah, so that's the main website there. Star Myths of the World has a section with videos, has a section with books where you can see some of the sample content, has a blog which is over 1,200 entries, and you can search them. So you can search through, and sometimes I do get into different things about economics and politics, so we may not always agree, but and my mind has changed over the years as well. But you can search the blog is what I'm saying. So if you want to search for Beam or Arjun, or you want to search for the myths of Norse myths or Greek myths, you can search for different goddesses, all those. You can search for different, Zeus or whatever, and see other blog posts that I've written. And there's also podcasts. I put up, the archived podcasts that I've been on. So hopefully if we got this all on recorded, I'll make it into a blog post as well and put it on there. But people can go there basically is the easiest way. But I am on Instagram. If people, I'm late to Instagram. I'm only recently on there.
Me too.
But thank you for reaching out to me on Instagram, Jennifer. This whole conversation wouldn't have happened if you hadn't reached out to me.
Yeah.
So,
and
let me stop sharing.
The website is a fantastic website. It's fast. It's really easy to navigate through. So that it is a fantastic website. I'm still getting mine built because my brother builds fantastic websites.
Oh, wonderful.
It's my brother. So it's a fantastic website. It's really fast. It's really beautiful to look at with the stars behind, and it's easy to find the books and the videos and everything. I've been diving right into it from the moment you responded. So
thanks so much. I know it's late back there too, so I'll let you get to your family.
So Jennifer, you have recorded this whole thing. You could transfer it to both of us. When I get my laptop back, I'll edit it for our purposes. And of course, David can do it for his reasons. So it's all together. We can.
I think David's the host. So he has
to... I'm the host. Oh dear. Can I turn it back to you?
Yeah. You stop recording. You be in charge and then turn it back to me.
Okay. So let's see here. So.
So what happens when you change your ship suddenly? She was the host. Now you're the host. She was recording.
I know. We don't want to lose the recording.
We'll find out.
Is it possible?
Why don't you just
Should
I stop recording or give it back to you? I think
when we all leave, you can both of you can find out who's got the recording.
Very good.
I'm on an iPad.
All right. Okay. So I can stop recording from here still.
Oh, then you are still okay.